on 2017 bonds. And we'll start with introductions, and we'll start at this end.
John Middleton. Jim Drain.
Ellie Gray Jackson.
Forrest Dunbar.
Pete Peterson. Mike Abbott. Lance Wilbur.
And in the audience, please.
Dennis LeBlanc, Fire.
David Warner, Fire. Chief Talley, Police Department.
Barbara Jones, Municipal Clerk.
Rose Foley, Assembly Budget Analyst.
Al Chakowski, Maintenance and Operations.
Laurie Robinson, Public Works Administration.
John Blada, Parks and Recreation. Sherry Hanson, Project Management and Engineering.
Gary John, Budget Management Engineering. Full Sound Public Transportation. Rough Hall, GMP. All that ready there, street maintenance.
Thank you very much. Is there any? I'm sorry, thank you. Is there anyone on the phone? Thank you. Mr. Wilbur, looks like you're presenting. You have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Well, I appreciate the time today of the Assembly. The administration would like to, the purpose of today's work session is to give a review of the proposed 2017 bonds. I think much of this conversation will be familiar as the projects that we're going to illustrate that are in the bonds are the ones that we are included in the approved capital improvement budget. I'd like to take the opportunity to sort of remind everybody and then walk through the list of events. We'll do that. So, part of this presentation today, I want to talk a little bit about some of the information we got in public finance as to how we are doing and our cost of the funds and how we are doing on our bond debt. I know there's been a question of the Assembly in the past. And then remind the Assembly of what is the total amount of our capital improvement budget, what's for bonds and the other supporting documents. And then talk about each of the 5 bond packages that we have proposed. We have one small change from the improved capital improvement budget that I'd like to address, and then just remind the Assembly of the ordinances that we have for public hearings scheduled for next Tuesday night on December 20th. So first, these first 3 slides have an illustration of, and I hope everyone's got a copy of the handout and a map so far. This information here shows sort of the cost of funds, and one point I want to point out here is there's pretty much for 2015 and 2016, the amount of what it costs us to borrow is pretty much the same. A lot of it has to do with the benefit of our continued positive bond rating and recently improved, and so this is a reflection of that. On the highlight on this slide here, how much debt is still outstanding from last year to this year. The amount of outstanding debt has gone from about 440 million to right around 430 million. So we have less outstanding debt than we did last year, or frankly since 2006. And a lot of that has to do with how our public finance folks have been managing and how much we've been issuing. This one here shows the proportion of payments from principal and interest in 2016 was almost a mirror of 2015, up slightly on the amount more we're paying towards our principal, but just ever so slightly there. So the point here is, I know last year, and I'll make the point again here in this presentation, is now is a good time to invest, and I think this bond proposal looks very much like the one we had last year. It was very successful. A lot of projects are underway, and a lot of projects in this proposal will be under construction in 2017 as well. So this is a snapshot of the approved 2017 capital improvement budget by funding source. The total amount of money here is $46,879,000. The total amount of bonds for all 5 proposals is actually $600,000 less than this. There's one project for animal control that we are going to be looking for some other opportunities to fund rather than bond. We took sort of a similar approach in the past. The other thing I want to point out here, and I think that maybe an Assembly member too and a couple directors have brought it to attention. What you see here is the dollar amounts that you see for fire, for example, that $2.4 million. Part of the projects that will be in the fire department are EMS, which is area-wide. So the total amount for the fire bond might not be those. And similarly with police or with project management engineering, for example, when you see the road bond, the traffic dollars will be incorporated into that. These are the departments that have been responsible for those projects, but At the end of the day, the total amount will be the exact same for what's in your approved CID and the total amount in the bonds, minus $600,000 for animal control, and we'll talk about those as well. So here's sort of a summary of the packages that you have that are being proposed. We have a total of 5 bonds for $46.28 million. It's about $1.6 million less than last year. The same amount of bonds that we have, the amount of debt service as it relates to per $100,000 is $11.38 per 100,000. Last year, for a bond that was a little bit more, obviously our debt service was about almost $14 per 100,000, so less in both categories here. I think the next 3 dots, these look very familiar, very much the same as a great bidding environment, thanks again to the management of our funds. Our interest rates are still low. And on the shovel ready, I think it's important that the Assembly recognize this, that particularly in the parks and in the road projects, in the parks projects, half of the ones that they have identified here are construction projects ready to build. About 24 of the projects that you'll see in the roads, of roughly 36, 37 projects, they're construction projects, either in total or in part, and I'll talk a little bit more about those. So we have a lot of projects from last year that are in construction, and a lot of projects in this bond that are proposed to be in construction. If I'm going too fast, please let me know. So let's talk about, these are 3 bond proposals. One, we have an area-wide bond that includes public safety and transit. We have, under the ambulances, we have 2 new ambulances that are included in that first proposal there. School zone safety, again, this is part of that traffic, but since traffic is an area, and this portion of traffic is area-wide. The matching funds for transit, that should look very familiar. And then we've got some improvements down around transit, including replacement of the roof at Warm Storage, which is, I think, about 28 or 30 years old. For the fire bond, again, we have a replacement. I think this is 2 engines. The chief can correct me if I'm wrong. 3 engines. Thank you, Mike. 3 engines for replacement there. A lot of exterior lighting improvements, primarily to old fire stations, and improving those. When you look at that, and when you read the description in your CIB, you'll recognize that it's also a recommendation for improving safety and reducing risk, just navigating in and around our fire stations. And then the vehicle maintenance roof, that's off of over by Old Fire Station 3 by the Alaska Regional. That roof is over 35 years old. There's a lot of code, seismic. They need some sprinkler improvements in there, so there's a lot of improvements to be made at that facility. Over at the police and the police area, this bond, it really is focusing on the first one there is remodel over at the training facility out at Jewel Lake and Diamond. With the academies that we've been having, a lot of improvements are necessary out there, but primarily that's to assist Chief Tolley and his department with making sure that they have the best the best facility they have when they're running their academies out there. They do have some minor improvements out at the headquarter building. I think their interview rooms are scattered, and when they need to move around, they use a common area. They want to improve that situation so it's a little bit more secure. And then for the headquarters facility as a whole, there's some requirements for perimeter fencing and secured access into and out of the headquarters building, both off of Elmore and off of Tudor. So for perspective, last year pretty much these bond amounts are very similar. Area-wide was a little bit more, but I think pretty much the same proposal that we had last year. The next group of projects is at Parks and Recreation. We have about 12 projects here, and I think at least half of these are construction, Campbell Creek, Muldoon, safety improvements out at Valley of the Moon, South Anchorage Sports Park, Town Square, and there are others that require design. So John Rada and his outfit, they have a nice blend, very similar to the ones we had last year. Projects, the one different that would be here is when you look in your capital improvement budget, Government Hill Community Center, that's one of those projects that's identified under maintenance and operations, but appropriately placed here under the Parks Fund, because it is a community facility. So, again, very much, this is the exact same list that you had inside the project, inside your CID. The last one, roads, and there are a lot of projects. I think there's 36 or 37 roadway projects, individual roadway projects inside the bond proposal. These are some very high level projects to recognize. 100th Avenue, if those of you who have been down in South Anchorage, live in South Anchorage, or have been shopping at the Target or any place in that end of the neck of the woods, you'll see that that one's already underway. This one here finishes that project. That's a construction. We, for this purpose of this presentation, I've grouped all of the little paving. We have some variety of little flooding projects, drainage, ADA, some railroad work, match for a variety of other things, and a comprehensive list is in your book. And if you need it, we can also give it to you. So I can bind all of those here. Here's some other highlights. I know the Assembly and the public has been interested. Alley paving all over Anchorage, about $300,000 there. Bering Street roof, we've included this one here. Bering Street roof's about 39 or 40 years old. A lot of improvements necessary inside the facility. That facility itself maintains pretty much all of the heavy-duty equipment used inside ARTSA, which is a heavily used facility. A couple subdivision projects here. This is a design kit. Many of you are familiar with Dugan. This is a construction project, a significant portion of our bond. Moving down into pedestrian safety, another large construction. Image in Jamestown. They have some, it's pretty much designed, and maybe some additional work beyond design included in that. Streetlight improvements, storm drain, traffic calming, and then Turnagain Boulevard, the last sort of significant construction project that we have proposed in this bond. Our bond this year, $36,940,000, and so that's a little bit more than we had last year, but very much similar. The last project I want to just mention, we have a project that was recommended for bond funding, and that's the animal control roof. Speaking with the department and municipal manager, we're looking at some other opportunities when we might be able to complete that project. And, so we know that it's a need, and we're looking to figure out ways how we might be able to accommodate that. So I just have a couple more slides here, just to remind the Assembly and members of the public, the departments. On the 20th, we have a public hearing. We have these Assembly items, these ordinances are in front of you for parks and area-wide fire, police, and roads. And again, I know a lot of this looks very familiar, but the way that we package it is slightly different than the way it was illustrated in the CID. All the projects are the same. We really haven't made any significant changes. So I'm sure that's all I have. If you have questions, I'll be glad to help address them.
Thank you, Mr. Wilbur. Let the record reflect that Mr. Roth has joined us. Mr. Training?
Lance, let's go back to the fire department.
The fire department?
Right, we've got a new fire station on McGraw Road. It does not have the ability to create traffic. What's being done with that to get that system put in? So when a fire truck rolls out, the lights turn red so the fire truck can get out.
Yeah, I think
What's being done and how much money do we need to put in here? Because that's a priority in my book, is the safety of our fire department personnel.
so. Dennis, if you want to start, I know Stephanie's here too.
Yep, the station opened up this fall. There remains a concern, particularly with the traffic traveling north because of the rise before you come to the entrance into the fire station. Working with the traffic department, we commissioned a third-party engineering study to determine if a traffic preemption signal was warranted. That study concluded that one wasn't warranted. So right now, while we still have significant concerns about safety, the traffic department has installed a camera there at the Gardner and our Glen intersection that looks back at the driveway entrance, and that's being monitored on a very frequent basis, as well as the station personnel are documenting all of the near misses that are occurring, and our plan is to revisit that particular question and as to whether or not.
I'll see you revisit it. The reason I'm asking is we've got a PD council resolution, they want one there. I've talked to 6 or 7 firemen that pull out of there. They tell me all the time about near accidents. So what would it cost to get the system put in there?
I'd have to defer to the traffic department.
If you're talking construction of a signal
Yeah.
specifically at that location, the signal itself would be a minimum of $1 million, and that does not include the acquisition of right-of-way, because all of the improvements, when you look at that roadway, the sidewalk on the other side of the street and on the fire station side of the street go right to the edge of right-of-way. So if there was to be a construction of a signal at that location, there's going to have to be right-of-way acquired to be able to actually construct it, and private property acquired to be able to construct a signal at that location.
Because the chairman and I have a meeting at 2 o'clock tonight, and it's gonna be one thing to answer. So what do I tell them? We can't afford it? Or it's just a review?
It remains under study.
Yeah, it continues to be evaluated.
Thank you. I just want to know what to tell them, because they're gonna ask us tonight. Another one goes to Parks and Rec. John, on your Hamel Creek Trail rehab, is that the same trail that the bikes use that comes down 47th? Or is that another project?
Sorry.
You've got Hamel Creek Trail rehab for $750,000?
Yeah, it's the entire trail.
Okay. Could we add $200,000 into that for concept? That's what I'm looking. I don't like the fact that the bikes let off 47th and the kids sit there looking for a break in traffic, which never happens. They rush across. Could we afford $200,000 put into this, John, for at least design work in case money comes down? I want us to be ready to develop that. We've got to do something with that area. I know it's millions of dollars to develop it, but at least I'd like to have the money there to do design work.
I guess a general question, one, is 200,000 enough, and should it be within Parks and Rec, or is that more of a function? That's a state road, Jerry.
No, that's ours.
That's ours. So does that fall under ours or under your purview? I'm not sure which. I think it would be under yours. I don't know if it might.
Not to
Yeah.
pass it on, but,
One, I don't know if it's gonna be enough money, and two, I'm a little fearful of pushing our bond total too high.
Okay.
Anything else?
We'll think about it, because I'll be bringing it up at the Sunday meeting, because I think the cost of having a kid flat in there is higher.
I know you and I've had that discussion.
And we're gonna keep having that until I see another way for the kids to get across the street. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Trini. Mr. Douglas?
Thank you. Just going off of what Dick just said as well on so Pete and I were at a community council meeting last night, Russian Jack, and that community council also is concerned about that area, both the fire station and the native charter school, which I believe is right.
It's
right
HB
next to it.
Bull if you're not native.
And the sort of interactions between the parents pulling in and out of there and traffic in the area. They want some kind of signal system or some kind of rear entrance there as well. So I guess that's more for Stephanie than for you, Chief, but know that that's on at least 2 community council radars, and that they are pushing us on it. My other question, I guess, is more from Mike. So I saw image drive reflection and Loon Cove. Both of those are, so Loon Cove isn't up there, I don't think, but it's on the map.
Yep.
Both of those are for planning and design.
correct.
And much like, Pete also asked us to put in shift funding for planning and design for Pleasant Valley. But with regards to those, I'm a big fan of the Loon Cove one in particular, and I think we talked to the engineers and they said it was $2 or $3 million that they thought was going to complete
That's
that.
the working estimate right now, but it'll, a lot will depend on the outcome of the design phase.
Okay, and then the people we talked to, we went to the open house, the image drive reflection, like they were talking $10 or $15 million for that project. And that to me seems almost like, maybe not pie in the sky exactly, but that seems like an awful lot of money. And I don't remember if that was on our I assume it was on our CIP or CIB a few years out. Are we I guess my question is really, are we stockpiling these plans with the hope that eventually we'll get state capital grants again? Or are we thinking about those projects also being on bonds in the near future?
Well, we're not assuming that there's state funding coming in the foreseeable future. So for several of those projects, it may not be that the full construction program that may be recommended by the planning and design effort and advocated for by the community, the full construction program may not be affordable. We may be doing only the worst of the existing sections, or we may not be doing the complete solution that was recommended. So at the end of these design phases, we'll have better information. But yeah, as we've talked about with Pleasant Valley, there's some level of risk that we're going to invest, $1 million between this bond increment and the existing remaining state grant funds, and we're going to end up with a project that's $20 million. And without a $20 million revenue stream available.
Thank you, Mr. Boomer. Any other questions? Mr. Steele?
I don't have any.
I'm sorry, Mr. Steele, Mr. Weddleton.
All right, a couple short ones. One, for people who are outside the Parks and Rec service area, will they see on their ballot the Parks and Rec bond?
Yes.
So they'll see it. But
Right now, service area bonds have to be approved by the service area and the entire municipality, because we are pledging full faith and credit of the muni, even for service area projects.
So you said in your page one, I guess, they're shovel ready, but these aren't really all shovel ready, but some are planned.
So, yes, that's correct, yeah.
Is 100th Avenue shovel ready?
Yes. 100th Avenue is under construction right now.
So, if this bond passes, it'll start being built in the summer of 17.
It'll finish the construction, just keep going. Otherwise,
Yeah.
right now it's being surcharged.
Right now, we're spending legislative grant money that is 3 or 4 years old. And that is funding the surcharging work that is going on. We're basically piling a whole bunch of gravel out there that'll compress the material and will allow for the construction of the road on it in the 2017 season, assuming the bond passes. And that's the same thing with Dubin and the same thing with Turnigan Avenue.
But that was my understanding that surcharging is going to take all
6 months.
17, right? Oh, 6 months.
6 months. So assuming that the surcharging will be complete by the end of December, which is the current contract plan, the surcharging will be complete in June, and that will allow for the road construction immediately following that. The good thing about 100th is, since it's not a road already, it's a relatively simple construction project. You're not dealing with existing traffic, you're not dealing with businesses along either side. It's a much more, frankly, efficient project in that regard. Contractor can go 24/7, do whatever they want on their pace, rather than having to work with traffic and neighbors and others. So in that regard, it should build quickly, and we fully expect it to be in use at the end of the construction season 2017.
Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Weddleton. Mr. Steele?
Is there any wet?
You go next. Please.
I know there's wetlands that are to the north of that.
And to the south.
Does it slop over into the right-of-way area, or?
No,
Is that gravel necessary for that purpose, or what?
Yeah, even though it looks like a straight line on the map that you've got
I
here,
know.
it actually, there's a little bit of a kink in the road there,
Yeah.
and the road swings to avoid some of the wetlands impacts. So the road does deviate a little bit from a pure east-west orientation to avoid the most important of the wetlands conflicts.
One of the big ideas, I'm sure, if I may follow on, is some of the industrial land down there in terms of making it available or opening it up. Is that the case, and are there plans in that area?
There are some private landowners. Siri owns a large chunk of land immediately to the south of the new portion of 100 that's built. There are wetlands conflicts in that area, but yes, there are a variety of development options that this will promote. There's a lot of developable land along C Street that this 100th intersection, once it's expanded to be a four-way intersection, it'll make that land more developable as well.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Steele. Mr. Trainee?
John, going back to you for a second, what do you envision, I see Folker Park here for 200,000, what are you planning on putting in there?
We're already in the process of working with that community group, as you know, when we met over at Verizon. And,
Barbara Gardner?
What's that?
Barbara Gardner?
Maeve is already working with that group, developing the plan, and they anticipate they'll have agreement and we'll be able to get started on the park. I don't know what their final decision is for priorities, but they are actively working it right now.
So they're planning, this is gonna be right across from the senior center that's there, senior housing.
Between the Mission Place and
Right,
Providence,
'cause
the old block area.
they tend to look out, the seniors look out the window, they wanna be able to go in there, so you're making that so the walkers can get through there?
Yep.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Mr. Peterson?
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I'm drawing a blank on this, the downtown lighting and signals upgrade, what exactly is that? I recall off the top of my head what that was.
I can start that, and we have folks here that can help too. That's a combination of street lighting and traffic signal upgrades. We have a lot of very old fixtures and a lot of very old underground conduit and electric transmission system throughout downtown. And this will allow us to work on that. We'll also convert to LEDs wherever we're touching streetlights.
Okay. All right.
Thank you, Mr. Peterson. Mr. Cobb?
The Chester Creek flooding one, I don't see it.
It's down towards the bottom.
Yeah, I see it on the map. Oh, is it?
Down 15.
It's in the brown.
Well, yeah, I see it on the map too. But so Mike, how much is that, and what are we doing with it?
Chester Creek is 500? Yeah, 500. We'll begin to address the 500,000 will not complete the work that we expect will be necessary. Chester Creek, especially at the lower end, has silted up, in part because of natural processes, and in part because it is the storm drain for Midtown and downtown Anchorage. And so as a result, we're moving a lot of sediment through our pipes into the creek. So what we're going to be looking at are places where we can essentially remove that silt from the stream channel. And that'll be a relative, it could be a complicated process given fish and game constraints. But our goal would be to begin to empty out the stream channel of the material that has accumulated there. We'll also be evaluating the possibility of expanding culverts. But frankly, that we're not sure that without working in the stream channels, that just changing the culvert size will make the necessary impacts to
And
reduce
it's still
the
back
flooding.
up even if you put in big
Right.
culverts.
If the stream channel is already, if its carrying capacity is reduced because of silt, further reduced because of ice, because it only floods when we have thawing after the main channel is frozen. Then you can have the biggest culverts in the world, and you're still going to run over the banks there at Valley of the Moon Park, and then on the west of Arctic as well.
500, and you think that gets us planning, or?
No, that'll be work. That'll be some level of work. That'll be done primarily by the street maintenance organization, if we can figure it out with the Fish and Game folks.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Cobb.
Yeah, Mike, I'm concerned, we've been working on this for a long time. And they tried those diversion culverts that dump the water down.
Onto the bike path?
Chester Creek Trail.
Yeah, it works.
Yeah.
It gets really wet bike paths.
And I had this discussion with your predecessor, and you're absolutely right. What needs to happen is that channel needs some attention in terms of deep. We had the flood of all those houses there that abut the creek by Arctic, and ultimately a bridge or a larger culvert across Arctic is going to be necessary, I believe. And I think there's also major silting in that first lagoon and also probably in the bigger lagoon all the way out to the sea. So,
I think we agree with that.
I don't
As
know
you
when
know,
we're
there's
gonna
salmon
start
in that creek now. And so that complicates the regulatory challenges that we deal appropriately. But, so we're not sure how much work we're gonna be allowed to do in the stream channel.
I'm really concerned about the flooding of those houses along 18th Avenue.
This weekend would be a good time to be concerned about it.
I know it, and if it happens again, they're gonna freak out.
Thank you, Mr. Steele. Mr. Dunbar?
Yeah, just really quickly, I think you've already talked about this a little bit, but with M18, the Fish Creek improvements, design work there, could you describe a little bit about what that is? And does that include daylighting? Is that the long-term plan for part of Fish Creek, or is that in the works in terms of design?
M18?
Yeah, Fish Creek improvements, design, phase 5, design, inlet to Lake Otis.
Yeah, I'm not sure why it says Lake Otis on that. Jerry, am I missing that? Fish Creek is in Spenard, right?
Yeah, Lake Otis.
Yeah, it goes-
It's also my area.
It's underground.
Oh, I see. Oh, you're talking about, sorry.
The creek starts over by,
Over on College Village, right?
this is the start of some design work, potentially some sedimentation bonds or something like
Thank you.
that.
Anything
We'll
else?
evaluate during the design phase.
What, can you give me any more detail? I mean, what's the long-term vision for what you're planning with Fish Creek there? I mean, is it just, are you just talking drainage, or is there something else going on there? Are we talking?
We primarily, in the past, have done 4 or 5 phases based on a study that was done years ago. And so this was, I believe, the top priority of the Campbell Park Community Council area was to do an additional phase that would be focused in their area. And the recommendations from that study reference sedimentation ponds in that part of the channel, that part of the creek.
Okay. So
So
we're
that
not
would
talking,
be the focus that the design team would initially begin to look at.
we're not talking about fish restoration, fish habitat yet.
No.
Thank you, Mr. Dunbar. Mr. Steele?
Yeah, hopefully on Fish Creek, we're gonna go all the way up to like the Spenard Rec Center area, the park there. And the trail all the way out to the sea, hopefully is going to be improved. And the channel itself, I think, needs certainly cleaning, and maybe cut back some of the vegetation and that kind of stuff, some tender loving care, all the way out to the ocean. So I'm hoping that that's in the works sometime. Along the creek. Daylighting, I've heard that Cooking doesn't want to do it, and they're a big property owner up there in that lower Spenard road. Anyway, it needs some tender loving care, I'm sure.
We do have some projects, one's federally funded to repair fix the trail from Northwood to Spenard Road, and then we have some other funding we're looking at, going from Spenard towards turning to McCray and that area.
Yeah.
Do some repairs on the trail.
Do we have right of way or the ability to extend the trail all the way out yet? I know there was some conflict with the railroad and that type of thing.
I don't know the issue right away.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Steele. Any other comments or questions from anybody? Okay. Work session's done. Thank you for being here.
Thank you, Madam Chairman.